one of the most exciting matchups that I have on my radar in terms of the Big Ten is Michigan versus Illinois. And when I look at this team right now, Michigan's 4-2, and Illinois 5-1 right now. And I've been covering both teams, rather extensively on the program. And even when I covered Illinois versus Nebraska a couple weeks ago, one of the things I was asking myself is is Illinois is Illinois actually the record that they are? What I mean by that is, even when you think of Army and Navy and other teams who have gone on a really impressive run, sometimes you ask yourself, have they actually played the record that they have? Or, are there some flaws that we're missing? I'll even sit there and throw Liberty. I think Liberty is a really good example of that, since they play in the Conference USA, and they didn't look good versus Florida National. They didn't look good versus New Mexico State, and that's kind of the same thing that I'm thinking about in terms of this matchup here, as they travel to Champaign, Illinois, and at Memorial Stadium. You know, the thing about I'll start off with Illinois, and then I'll shift over to Michigan. I mean, I didn't watch a lot of the Illinois Purdue game, particularly I watched a little bit of the second half, and it was a 50-49 overtime win. Purdue was without Hudson Card, and for the most part too, Illinois' defense has been rock solid this season. I mean, when they played against Nebraska, they got a lot of pressure on Raiola, and that was a really fundamental reason as to why they won that game. And here, just a couple quick stats here, just to kind of put this all together. 297 yards for Purdue. Backup quarterback Brian Brown was in. Two 100-yard rushers, 239 yards total. And up to this point, I mean, the previous 5 games before Purdue, they've only given up 78 points. And if Illinois wants to win this game, which I would argue they probably are the underdog to some degree, in order for them to win this game, I think you gotta make sure that this defense wasn't a complete fluke, because I think one of the criticisms that they're going to have is, well, if Purdue can throw for 300 yards against Illinois, what doesn't stop Michigan from doing that? Now, I'm not saying they're going to do that. I mean, for Michigan, throwing 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, I mean, that's an accomplishment if you ask me. But I think Illinois has a number of advantages that are going to kind of go in their way. I think Luke Altmeyer has been a really, really good quarterback for him this year, especially for an Illinois team, for the most part, was overlooked for a number of reasons. I mean, Brett Bielema, either fifth year, yeah, I want to say fifth year. He's three when he was at Wisconsin, 3-2 when playing Michigan. He's what I give Illinois credit for is the defense is solid. You have Luke Altmeyer, who has thrown 14 touchdown. I think it was 14 touchdown passes. Doesn't turn over the ball very often. Can find the receivers in space. He is definitely a little more athletic than people give him credit for too. And one of the keys to this game is going to be how comfortable is he going to be? Because I think if you're Michigan, one of the most obvious things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get that Michigan front seven to get some pressure. You're going to have them, get uncomfortable a little bit and get some momentum really early. Whether that's a fumble or interception, you're going to need that, because what Michigan has going for them is they recently started Jack Total versus their game against Michigan last week, and they started off the year with Davis Warren, and that obviously didn't work out. You have Alex Og, who is definitely a big running threat to Michigan, but he has proven when he started that he's just simply not a threat when passing the ball. He's I think to myself of you think of Devin Gardner, for example, and Denard Robinson, and although both those quarterbacks were solid, they could actually throw the ball a little bit, where Alex Orji's kind of more of a one-dimensional sort of player. And I'll get to Michigan in a second, but you know, can Illinois get back to the example that we've seen them throughout this season? Because one thing you can ask yourself too is, we've seen them in a number of different games. I mean, we can also talk about their lone loss versus Penn State too, where they lost 21-7. And Penn State did a phenomenal job at running the ball against them. They also had 239 yards rushing versus only 135 yards passing. So if you ask me, this game's going to be a little bit more similar to a Penn State Illinois game than a Illinois Purdue game, or kind of a shootout sort of matchup. I definitely anticipate this game being quick. It definitely, if you're looking at it from that sort of lens too, it makes a Wolverine win look a lot more achievable and realistic you know compared to that too. Because at the end of the day, Michigan's offense at the moment is not anywhere near being able to put up the production that Purdue did last week. But what they can do is, they have a couple positives. They had a bye week, which you know couldn't have come at a better time, considering how injured a number of their staff is, or a number not staff, a number of their edge rushers and their and cornerbacks and whatnot too. So that obviously them getting a little bit more healthy is key. Transitioning from OG to Jack Total, having 2 full weeks of practice, him getting into the rhythm of being a legit starter. You're playing at the big house, 100,000, you have 100,000 people playing at that stadium. You're on campus. You're going to be known. You know, getting him to act like a starter, be a captain, be a leader, knowing the playbook, having the eyes on you. Can he handle that sort of situation? Because Brett Bielema is a well established football coach, and he's gonna put some pressure on him. And when you ask me, one of the keys to this game, when I think about this Illinois team, is although Illinois has done a phenomenal job at passing the ball this year, I think you have to ask yourself, to what extent can they run the ball this year? Now, definitely to an extent, you have Mason Graham, you have all those guys who've been great at rushing the ball, who've been great at stopping the run. But Michigan right now, they're 111th right now in pass defense. And if you're Illinois, obviously one of the keys to this game is going to be exploiting that. Certainly, that's something I definitely think you're going to see more of if you're an Illinois fan, much like they did versus Nebraska, where they definitely passed the ball a lot more. But the reason why I bring up the rushing attack so much, as which would kind of be opposite in terms of what other analysts are going to say, I'm bringing that up because if you're Michigan, one of the things you have to ask yourself is, how can we make this Illinois team one-dimensional? How can we make them one-dimensional like Penn State did? Because Illinois didn't play a terrible game versus Penn State, but as I was watching that game, the reality is that Penn State showed that they were the better football team. So if you're Michigan, how do you ask yourself, can you play a clean game on offense with minimal turnovers? Can you get this rushing attack going to the point where Tuttle doesn't really have to make all of these throws down the field? All he really has to do is be able to find the right reads, get the check downs, and at least make it somewhat plausible that Illinois can't just bring 8 guys in the box all game. And you know, most importantly, if you're Michigan too, what type of film, what type of takeaways can you get from that Purdue game too? Because up to this point, I mean, Purdue just fired their offensive coordinator Graham Harrell, who had a ton of success as a college football quarterback, as well at Texas Tech and all that. And from people that I've talked to from from Purdue, from that area. I mean, they're glad he's gone. But when they brought in Hudson Card, who transferred from Texas, I mean, everybody thought there's going to be a lot more expectations there, and kind of them getting to that next level. And when you think about this Michigan Illinois matchup, you know, the big look, that the big look, or the big thing that we're going to be seeing is, you know to what extent can Michigan pass the ball? Because I'm curious for a couple of reasons. I wonder how much are we going to see a two quarterback system from Michigan? Are we, like, how much of Alex OG are we going to see? Because I guess if you're Illinois, I guess it's twofold. Because yes, Alex OG is his he can definitely run the ball, and he definitely is going to be a threat in terms of those third and ones, third and twos, where if you put him out there in those situations, you have to account for both the running back and him. But at the same time too, you know, how can Sherrod Moore and his offensive staff put total in a situation where he can get comfortable early and build some confidence on the road? Because if you ask me, that has to be one of the keys to this game. Yes, they're gonna have to run the ball. Yes, Michigan's secondary is gonna have to, stop the pass a little bit too. But if you're Michigan, you really kind of just can't have these critical, errors that we've kind of been seeing throughout the season too. Because I mean, one of their best weapons is Colston Loveland, and they're definitely going to be looking for him to kind of be the center of this passing attack, and really you know being his go-to guy. But you know to some extent too, I mean, you have to ask yourself, can can Michigan pass the ball enough to open up this rushing attack that they have? Because Illinois' front seven, much like Michigan's front seven, is very respectable, and a lot of the weaknesses on both these defenses have been in the secondary. So on paper, you have to imagine that this matchup is a little bit more beneficial to Illinois, since Altmeyer has been excellent this year. You can't ask for much more from him. Outside of the Purdue game, Illinois' defense has done enough to you know to possibly make a run at the playoff, for all we know. Let's say if they can beat Michigan this week, that you take them down to 4-3. That means you have Ohio State and Oregon in front of you, and at the very least, even if they don't get into the playoff, what if they get into a really strong bowl game, being somewhere in that 15 to 20 range, if they keep on having the success that they're having. But back to Michigan though, you're going to have to get Donovan Edwards going, because yes, you're going to have to find the balance between getting Jack comfortable early, but at the same time, Donovan Edwards really is the foundational piece to this offense. It's him and getting Loveland going. If you're them, that's something that Davis Warren couldn't really do at all throughout the season, and Texas was a really strong example of it. Was just one of those games where where Warren couldn't make enough of those throws for Texas to really be worried about the passing game. So if we see the same sort of thing that might happen here, it could be a really strong sign that Illinois wins this game. I think a lot of people are picking Michigan for a number of reasons. I think first and foremost that you know Michigan has been such an elite program, under Jim Harbaugh and all those things, that they still have that stigma of being one of the top programs in the country too. And yes, you do have Will Johnson, who's one of the best cornerbacks in the entire country, and that's definitely noteworthy. But at the same time, when you're looking at this full picture, to me, the big keys of this game is going to be who wins, which front seven is going to be more dominant. because you definitely have to worry from a Michigan perspective that you're going to hope that a lot of these players that are banged up right now are healthy. So if they aren't healthy, I think that's definitely going to be something that Illinois can take advantage of. Secondarily, it's going to be, which team is going to be less one dimensional. I think that's really, yeah, that's the better way to phrase it. Which team is going to be one less dimensional? Are Is Illinois going to be just throwing the ball 50 times a game and not rushing because they know they're not going to get anything down the middle? Or are we going to see Illinois be creative and maybe go with some halfback zones, some halfback sweeps on the outside, and maybe doing a little bit of trickery to try to catch this secondary napping or sleeping? And then from the Michigan side of the ball, it's can we get a complete game from total without a serious turnover that can cost them the game? And can they get Donovan Edwards in a situation where Illinois has to respect him enough to the point where, yes, if they do bring 8 guys in the box, can total make them pay even once or twice with a quick slant, or a quick flat route, to the point where if he can go out and get a couple of these chunk plays and lead them to a couple of big plays, it could be the reason why we're talking about Michigan winning this game, 24-21, for example. But with that said, I mean, I struggle seeing Michigan win this game because of the injury issues that they've had. They're going on their third quarterback. They're traveling on the road, and I don't see them kind of putting this together as much as you think too. Because I think Wink Martindale, it is a fantastic hire from Sherrod Moore, having a legitimate defensive coordinator who has an extensive background in the NFL, to the point where he hasn't had to worry as much on the defensive side of the ball. But when you think about Michigan and how much they've struggled in the passing game too, it definitely is a serious question mark. And I look forward to seeing how much can Michigan turn it around and really put together this passing game. But at the same time too, Altmeyer hasn't turned over the ball much either. So if you're this game, look to see who's going to be less one dimensional, which defense is going to show up in the most pinnacle moments, and to what extent is Michigan going to try and get total going early, and who can get the most